they've had most of the whiskey by this point. And now that Beau's passed out and it's just her and Reid, and this is all from Lou's point of view. I turned to face Reid, startled to find him directly behind me, his eyes fixed on mine with a deep, unsettling intensity that hadn't been there before. Truth or dare? Butterflies erupted in my belly as he stepped closer still. Heat washed across every inch of my skin. Truth. Oh, hold on. He shook his head slowly. I swallowed hard. Dare. Kiss me. If I hadn't been reading this at like 1:30 in the morning, would have screamed when I read that part.
Welcome back. This is In Bed with Books with Bethany
and Melissa.
This is a continuation of the last episode of Gods and Monsters. We spoke for about 4 hours. It got really, really long. So we wanted to split it up per your request. Now we're going to get into the juicy bits, the fun bits, the
end of the book.
The climax, if you will.
So picking up literally where we left off.
Yep. Here we go. Enjoy.
The next half of the book is just going to be him either relearning Lou or things coming back incrementally. And so he essentially just runs off and finds Jean-Luc. And Jean-Luc...
Yeah, he got too horny.
Did he? Yes.
Well, that's what we were arguing, not with each other, but generally, was that... Because the hate, his aggression, is so clearly hiding how much is desire.
Yes.
So do you want to? You had a very good.
So this, I was very interested in this dynamic, and I was like, actually, as heartbreaking as it was to see Reid wake up and not know who Lou was, this is my favorite part of the book, is because Reid is so tortured, like physically. The idea is that while Reid was gone, was that they're going to seduce him. She was Lou's going to seduce Reid back into like,
she needs him to fall
remember
back in love with
her and stuff. Yes. And so that's like the plan. So there's like this really cute part where, so Reid's just like watching them from afar as he's like approaching, coming back. And he says, was she, I stared at them incredulously, was she pulling Lou's neckline down? I averted my eyes, furious, but glanced back as Saley leaned over to pinch Lou's cheeks. And it was just like, they're like trying to puff her up, just like, it was so cute.
Yeah.
So you know what's coming.
It's like the bathroom at a bar.
Yeah, exactly.
The girls' bathroom at a bar.
And they, so like Lou's just like really laying it on thick. And they're on the horse. And Reid literally says, like, they're trying to discuss where they're going. And Reid's just like, I scarcely heard the exchange with each stride of the horse. The witch's backside moved against my lap, up and down, rhythmic, until heat suffused my entire body. I glared determinedly at the sky overhead. The situation had grown dire. Soon she would notice, and soon I would have to kill her for it. So it was like, he's getting, like, hard. Mm-hmm. And what I love about this is that he has a physical reaction to Lou that he can't understand because he can't remember her, but his body remembers her. And that's why this is like a new kind of torture. So what comes is like Reid's hatred for witches is synonymous with this centuries old like fear of desire. So like when he looks at her, it drives him physically mad, and he confuses that hatred with his own desire. It's actually like this like textbook situation, but I love the way that it plays out because he has a physical memory of her and a physical like reaction to her. Like he remembers her smell. He's like, she smells like amazing. The way that she like looks, her eyes, everything, her collarbone.
He smells her hair at one point. People who hate each other definitely smell each other's hair. What I find interesting is that this time around, he's got a much more aggressive attitude towards his hatred of witches. And so I think, kind of just doubling down on your point here, before he had never experienced sex.
Yes. Yes.
Now that he's like, his body is like, yep, that's the one. His body is like fighting back. His body is creating this desire in a new way, and the only way he knows how to deal with it is by like
Rage.
violence. It's exacerbating that centuries old issue.
Yes. Yes. And then they like, I mean, this is jumping forward a bit, but when they go to the chateau, that's where they're off to get the ring. So they go to the chateau. Lou gets them in, and they're up in like Morgaine's chambers where all of the treasures live. And Reid finds a Balisarda. And so he grabs that because that's his only like protection against witches, right? Because he's still in like hunter mode. And he has, I don't know if it's the Balisarda. I don't think it is because it would probably kill her. But he has like this blade, straight blade. And he points it at her, and they're like, she kind of just like walks towards it and pushes into it a bit, and then like a bead of blood comes up, and he says, a quick thrust, one simple movement, she would drive me mad unless I did it. And I'm like, the innuendo is not going unnoticed. I'm like, that is literally what you need to do is like pin her, like and that's actually the first time when they do have sex. That's when he starts seeing threads in seeing gold. That's right. The answers to everything is sex. No, but yeah, like it was just so enjoyable, this like new dynamic between the two, because if you've listened to the other episodes, you know I'm already a big fan of like the Lou Reid dynamic. I love that like Reid's this like blushing, sweet, honorable like guy, and Lou's just this like saucy, brazen, unpredictable like surprise to his like way of life. And now it's kind of gotten to like a new level where it's almost only sexual. Like it's only violent / sexual. Like it bridges that layer.
Well, she has this dilemma at one point where she's realizing that she doesn't know how she made him fall in love with her the first time. He just did. He just loved her. And I think it's around that time that she realizes, I need to stop trying to seduce him, and I need to start trying to let him see me.
Yes. And this is when she and Coco have a conversation. And we touched on this yesterday, which is we don't really see a lot of Lou and Coco's relationship. Because like the magic in the world, we just kind of get dropped. We're not really learning that much. We're just like, oh, this is just like what happens. So it's like Coco and Lou have been together forever. And now we just kind of got dropped into their relationship. So there's not much to like build. Like there wasn't a lot of attention to building that because it was already established. And so this was like a really nice reminder. Oh yes, this is my BFF, you know? Like Coco like gives her this like really good advice about like how to get to Reid, because seducing them hasn't worked. We're jumping ahead a little bit, but we want to come back to the truth or dare thing.
Yeah.
She essentially tells her that you need to be vulnerable. Like, you need to show him that you're vulnerable. You don't need to just tell him what you were, who he was, who you guys were together. You have to, like, show him who you are, honestly, like, vulnerably in front of you right now. So, like, you have to, like, go deeper. And then...
Especially... So, just real quick. Like we've mentioned before, again, with Low Melancholique and Isla, is that their truths were not honest.
Right.
And so that's kind of the issue that Lou is running into here, is that she keeps being really honest with him, but she's not showing herself honestly.
Yes.
Like she's hiding, instead of hiding behind jokes like she used to, she's hiding behind this like wall of past truths, trying to not have to confront the fact that she doesn't know how to get him to fall in love with her, and she's really scared that he won't.
Yeah. Yeah. So they find an inn.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it was
Jean-Luc found it.
The chateau.
Yeah, on their way back from the chateau, they escape and they find an inn, and Jean-Luc helps them because he's like, Sausher number one. Number one, Sausher.
So he thinks.
Yeah. And they get in, and that was something you mentioned yesterday was sweet, which was like, they're all wiped. Saley, like, is just like, ugh, and she just like falls on the bed, and then like Coco just falls on the bed next to her, and they just like fall asleep.
It's big progress from, I guess, the distrust that Coco would have had originally, not just for Saley, but like for anyone generally who's not Lou.
Yeah, exactly.
It shows that like she's accepted Saley into their group, and also she's opening up in a way that she wasn't able to before Ansel's death, and especially afterwards.
Yeah.
So Saley and Coco at this point are now passed out, and so Lou is still under the impression that she needs to seduce him. And so she goes over to the other room.
Real quick, though, there's a bargain that they made.
Yes.
When Reid was gone, and they were like, he'll be back. And they made this bargain that if Lou could seduce Reid, Bo would give all of his treasures to Saley. And if she couldn't, then Saley would have to give all of her riches to Bo. So Bo is like, it's fun because it gives Bo like kind of something to do in the group a bit.
But it also, I mean, it shows, because that's a very unbalanced bet.
Yeah.
You can tell that he's like, he doesn't have any doubt that she's going to re-seduce Reid. Bo also sees that playful side of Lou, and he can meet it. And so he knew that she needed a joke in that moment.
Yes.
Even though she's like, they're joking about my real life, she's still joking back. Like, she still needs it a little bit. And so he's eager to do that. So she goes over to the other room in the inn, to their room. And
they start having a drinking party.
Yeah, the owner of the inn apologizes for being rude to Jean-Luc. I think because he's essentially a cop. Yeah. And they're like scared that he's gonna be mean.
So they give him a bottle of whiskey, and Lou's just like, let's play Truth or Dare.
So a room of teenagers drinking and playing Truth or Dare is definitely not going to end sexually.
No, not at all.
My favorite part of that was that Jean-Luc didn't even want to play. And then the second Lou was like, well, I have secrets of Saley's now. He just like jumped up and he was like, okay, how do you play?
Yeah.
What are the rules?
Yeah.
And then they had to convince Reid too. They didn't have to convince Bo. Bo loves talking about himself.
Yeah.
So he loves being the center of attention. He's like, either I'm going to tell you something about me, or all eyes are going to be on me. So I'm playing. So the game gets going, and true to form, it starts out like playfully enough, but then I think the first time it gets really deep is when Jean-Luc turns to Reid and he asks if his heart is still in the chasseurs.
Mm-hmm.
And they just stare at each other for a second. Reid asks him, is yours? Nobody answers. Jean-Luc takes the whiskey and he drinks it because he doesn't want to answer, and then he says, I'm done with this game, and leaves.
Yeah.
One thing that we talked about in the last episode was that we see how evil Morgane and Lavoisin are. And so when we look at Lou and Coco, what we see is a possibility for a new future for the witches, specifically. And so this kind of recurring presence in this one as well, once we are reintroduced to Jean-Luc and the old Reid, is what the future of the Chaucers holds. And there's a couple of other things in the second half of the book that I'll briefly mention too. We've got Philippe, this kind of power-hungry guy who steals the captainship from Jean-Luc. And then the line that Saley has where she says to Jean-Luc, you're not supposed to fight the occult, you're supposed to fight evil. And that kind of mirrors something that the twins had said, Violet and Victoire, in book 2 when they're rescuing Reid and Bo, because they were like, they had their dream of being part of the Chaucers because they want to fight evil. And so I think in this moment, in this scene, Jean-Luc, so this is after Saley has told him what his job really is. Jean-Luc is actually questioning it, I think.
Yeah.
It's hard because same as it was with Reid, where you were raised in that environment. They were raised to
He's
be
already
there.
helping them. Like he's kind of, he realizes there's a lot of gray.
And I think here is he's really having to think about that distinction that Saley presented to him, because I think for so long they've been taught that they're fighting the occult when they were founded to fight evil. And evil is found everywhere.
Yes.
And I like that what they've done is said that the witches aren't the only ones that have to change their ways.
Yeah.
Because it is also implied at the end that it's implied that they're going to be, what's the word? I guess reshaping.
Yeah, they're going to reinstate it with like a bit of a different,
firmer ideals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that they had that exchange.
Yes.
Because their relationship, Jean-Luc and Reid's relationship, has been so fraught by the fact that Jean-Luc is so definitely jealous of Reid.
Yeah.
But in this book, we see that he's coming into his own a little bit more. He's defining himself separate from Reid's shadow.
Yeah.
And I think he definitely needed to travel with them a little bit to see that, because he sees a new side of Reid when he's with them.
Yeah, for sure.
But then the fun part of Truth or Dare, and I think we could probably just start talking about the sex scenes after this.
Yeah. So, well, there's this, my favorite part of the Truth or Dare scene was that essentially, yeah, it's literally Lou's last-ditch effort to seduce Reid. She's like, what better way than giving him whiskey and let's play Truth or Dare and like get everyone's like energies all sizzling. Yeah. Reid's a hard nut to crack or whatever. And then there's this part where she says, Reid remained standing, crossing his arms and glaring down at us like some sort of pink-cheeked, vengeful god. I sort of liked it. And I was like, ah! It was like so cute. It was just like, I saw him there and I was just like, that's
what you signed up for.
Yeah. This is what we came to see.
Yeah. So the game keeps going and eventually Bo passes out because Bo can't hang. They've had most of the whiskey by this point. And now that Bo's passed out and it's just her and Reid, and this is all from Lou's point of view, I turned to face Reid, startled to find him directly behind me, his eyes fixed on mine with a deep, unsettling intensity that hadn't been there before. Truth or Dare. Butterflies erupted in my belly as he stepped closer still. Heat washed across every inch of my skin. Truth. Oh, hold on. He shook his head slowly. I swallowed hard. Dare. Kiss me. If I hadn't been reading this at like 1:30 in the morning, would have screamed when I read that part. Okay, so at this point, she thought she was still trying to seduce him, and it's worked somehow. Just like last time, she's like, I don't know how it happened, but he fell in love with me. But she says no. And I love that she says no. One, for consent reasons. He's not sound of mind in a couple of different ways. But two, because if she had said yes then, and later he got his memories back, it would have felt different.
Yeah. In
book 2, we mentioned the fact that she kind of uses magic on him a couple of times.
She violates. It's violation.
Exactly. He point blank has to tell her, do not ever do that to me again. And so even though Lou's not the one that put the spell on Reid this time, because he's like under the influence of magic and this whiskey and everything, she's not ready. And she knows that he's not ready for them to take that step yet.
Yeah. And I love, she kind of coaxes him onto the bed and and he says, you smell like a dream. Doesn't she ask him, like, what do I smell like? And she's, again, and repeats
he says something and she's like, yeah. Hold on, let's see.
We're just going to read the book to you.
Yeah. So he says, why do you smell so sweet? And she says, what do I smell like, Reid? Like a dream. you smell like a dream, and he passes out.
Yeah. Ugh.
So that it's there, like not just in his like sexual organs does his body remember, but he smells her hair and he recognizes it. He just smells her when he's drunk and he knows that he knows it.
Oh, it's so sad. I feel so bad for him.
After this point, every time he's trying to think about it, he talks about it like he can almost reach what's happening.
Yeah.
And he's so desperate to find those answers. And if there was a way for her to break the spell, she would have, but she physically couldn't.
Yes. And this is what brings us into the sex scenes, which are the best sex scenes of the trilogy.
They exceeded my expectations.
The sex scenes in this book,
plural this time,
are some of the best I've ever read. It's not about how explicit it is. It's not about what they're doing necessarily. It's like we're so ready for it because Reid is in this hell, physically, sexually frustrated hell, and Lou just wants her Reid back. Like,
yeah.
And the first one is when they're on the boat, and we mentioned a little bit about how like Coco really helps Lou figure out like how to get to Reid by just being vulnerable rather than just remembering who we used to be. And so they go into the cabin of the boat.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets like hot and heavy, and like they're kissing, she's up against the wall, he's got his hand down her pants. Like it's like really kind of abrupt because he's just like really desperate and he just like doesn't know. You know, it's like between his rage and his sexual frustration, he has to kind of like, he's like, you know, and she's like there for it and stuff.
It seems like on some level he knows that interaction is what's going to start bringing some of those threads back.
Exactly.
But again, he's still not ready. He's
not ready. So, a few things. Real quick here.
There's layers
There's
to this.
So
like
many. Oh my God. It's so good. So he's desperate and he's like, show me, please show me how we used to be. And they're getting hot and heavy. And he's like fingering her and stuff. And then he goes, show me, please show me how we used to be. And then her eyes snapped open and she stopped moving abruptly because she was like, that's not what we need to do. Which is why Coco's conversation was so important.
Part of the issue with Lou trying to use like their past, like what they used to be, and with this phrasing that Reid uses is that they're different now.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're different. So if they're just using their past selves and they're trying to hang on to something, that person doesn't exist anymore. And so they need to pay attention to the present. They need to pay attention to how they are, not how they were.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important distinction that Coco helps her see.
Yes. And while they're hot and heavy, it's like Reid is literally pleasuring her out of desperation. It's not really about them right now. It's about him like wanting what they used to have. So she locks the door and magics their sound away, which is so important.
Especially for how vulnerable they're about to get.
Yeah, for sure. So she says, slow down, Reid. We have time. She'd given me this time to master myself, to regain some semblance of control. She wanted me to dictate the touch. She wanted to hear every word for what it was, a decision. Small decisions, yes, but decisions nonetheless. Honest ones. There could be no lies between us here, not like this. So another really strong lesson in consent, because this is emotional consent. It's a spectrum. It's respecting one's emotional space as well. And Lou did the right thing this time. She did it, you know?
And then on the reverse side, she's giving him the opportunity to see her as a person who requires that same consent.
Yes. And then I feel like I have mentioned this earlier where she says they're in the throes of it. I mean, we could go into that. So he's on the couch, sitting on the couch, and it's a very small cabin. She gets up on the table and sits down and is just kind of like waggling her like legs around, just like yawning, you know, just like, what do you want? What do you want me to do? And it's just like so cute. And then like, well, obviously she like takes her like pants off and her boots. And she still has a shirt on, and he's just like, why does she have a shirt on? Like, he just can't handle it. And it's just so sweet because he's like, I just want to touch her feet and her ankles. Like, I'm just like, he's so like innocent about it. Like, she's literally like bare in front of him. And she's like, but her ankles and her hip, her collarbone.
If I'm not mistaken, it wasn't just that he wanted to touch her feet. He was like, I want to massage her feet.
Yeah.
So like possible foot fetish aside, like
intimate.
Every girl's dream is to have a man look at you and just be like, she needs a foot massage. I'm going to give her a foot massage. She's just living the dream, and he doesn't even remember who she is.
I know. And I love that he mentions too that he's like, I was all taken by her collarbone. And all of a sudden now he's like, now she's in front of me. And I'm like, what? It could actually get better.
So the two key points in the conversation that she has with Coco is, one, stop thinking from the past, think of now. And two, real honesty requires vulnerability. So in this sex scene, they do arguably one of the most vulnerable things that you can do during sex.
Absolutely, which is eye contact. Yep.
The entire time.
Jesus Christ.
He starts instructing her on where to touch herself, which is, I think it starts at the inner thigh and it moves in. And then he's telling her, he's like asking her to do it the way that she wants. And so she's masturbating in front of him. And the entire time they cannot take their eyes off of each other.
And their head to head.
Eventually she like pulls him in because he stood up.
The only time that they aren't having eye contact is when he watches like a bead of sweat go down her chest. Yeah. Which I wasn't complaining about that either, so.
No.
And then he's like, he can't help himself. He has to like grab himself, and he's like, it was jarring to him.
Yeah. There was no other choice for him at that moment.
No other choice.
But I kind of feel like that sex scene, which wasn't even a sex scene, just like a sexy scene, was hotter than the second one. This was the moment when they broke through the bullshit of his like desire versus hatred thing that he was dealing with.
He needed that before they could come home to each other. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he needed to blow off that steam and see something real, and then we can move on to like, okay, Lou and Reid sex.
Yeah, and leading up to this, he's seen her be a good person, and so she's already started to break down his prejudice around witches being fully evil and all of that jazz. And then specifically in the Truth or Dare scene, which was just before this, she's showing him respect as a person. Because like that's what consent comes down to, is like respect for a person to make decisions about their own body and everything. And so the fact that she's able to do that shows him that she respects him as a person, which means she can't be as evil as he seems to think she is.
Which is how he fell in love with her the first time.
Yep.
Which they say at the end was, she took Estelle's pain of burning at the stake, and Ansel witnessed that, and Ansel told Reid, and Reid fell in love at the moment when he realized that she did that for someone else.
Yeah. Even though she's reckless and endangering herself constantly, it was her selflessness that made him fall in love with her.
Yeah. And so their plan is for Jean-Luc to get them into the prison and not actually drug them, so that they can like infiltrate and save Madame Labelle. We didn't really get much into the plot, but that's okay. We've covered a lot. But then the plan doesn't work because King August comes back and like is about to stab Lou in the neck. Or no, makes Jean-Luc do it. And so Jean-Luc's lost his position. Philippe has taken over because Jean-Luc kind of went MIA for a minute. And so their plan kind of just collapses at like entry, at the point of entry. Like, so she, in her mind, like pretending that she's drugged or whatever, is like, okay, like we could use magic right now, or we could just like go with the flow. So they end up getting drugged, right? Yes. And waking up in the cell. So it's her and Reid. And the cell is made, okay, out of the wood from Reid's ball sack. No. From Reid's Balisarde, that tree that ate his Balisarde, his ball sack.
Do you want to try that whole thing again?
What do you mean it's perfect?
I can hear you trying not to say ball sack.
Okay. The cell is made from the tree that Lou threw Reid's Balisarde in.
Yep.
It ate his Balisarde, and so now it became like this tree off of the road that they, like, I guess, cut down and made this cell out of that mutes or, like, lose magic. So unless she's in the middle, she doesn't really have magic. She can't really find her threads very well.
It's like it confines it to the cell.
Yeah.
So she can do magic within the cell.
Right. Okay.
Which it can only happen in the cell. It can't go anywhere else.
So they're in there, and poor Reid, he's still just struggling so much to, like, figure out, you know, he's trying to get his memories back. That's kind of been the prerogative from day one when he woke up, was like, how can I get my memories back? The witches can help me. The witches can help me, or whatever. And then... But
his, like, desperation in this scene is next level.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
trying everything
I just, like, imagine him, like, pacing back and forth. And then, like, trying to remember, because she was just like, just remember something and then follow it. And he was like, I just follow it and I open the door and there's nothing. It's just really hard for him. So then I'll let you take over.
Because they know that they're probably about to possibly die because nobody saved them yet. At first she starts going through their memories together and she's like, here's what happened here. And he's like, even when I remember something adjacent, I can't remember where you tie into this. And so they're spending hours going through their history together and nobody's come to save them. So they decide that the only thing they can do is have sex.
What better time?
Which I'm not complaining about. It's kind of like when we talked about Blood and Ash, where it's possible last night on Earth kind of sex.
Yeah. This is literally that.
Yes. They've moved past the question of whether or not Reid's ready. They know he's ready. He's desperate for their history together. And so because they can't find that anymore, they decide to focus on the now, which is that right now they want to have sex.
Yeah.
And this is where I think it's implied that he might have eaten her ass. And before I get into my argument, I want to say that I support this. I don't think this is a bad thing. In fact, I would prefer that he did. So Bethany and I are going to do a bit of a close reading of this section. And you're welcome to tell us what you think. Okay, so let me get my
Kindle out. She licks her thumbs and goes through.
Yeah.
And
page 510. So this is in the chapter called Confessional.
Yes. Okay. Despite the urgency of our situation, the huntsman patrolling outside, the sun setting over the city, Lou didn't rush as she slipped her palms into my collar, as she slid them down my back. My own hands moved leisurely to the hem of her shirt. Peeling the fabric from her belly inch by inch, I lowered her to the floor. She stripped my own shirt overhead. Heat pooled between us as she traced the scar on my torso as I eased down her body, as I tasted each curve. With every breath, every touch, sultry and slow, as if searching, the intensity built, the quiet desperation. Her fingers curled in my hair. My tongue stroked her hip. You called me your heathen, she said, on a sigh, arching and shifting my mouth lower, lower still. I would find her again, yes, but we still had this moment, this last breathless hour. You still are, sliding her pants down her legs. I flipped her over, trapping her.
Okay, so this is the first point. We know he's just licked her hip. So he's got his face down near her pelvis, and then he flips her over. There's no mention of her moving up higher or lower or him moving up. All that's happened is that she's flipped over. So now he's looking at her butt. All right, Bethany, please continue.
Her nails raked against the bars on the floor as I lifted her hips to kiss her, as I stroked her there instead.
Okay, so he's lifted her hips.
Okay.
Which means we've limited the options of what he's stroking her with.
Yes.
And where.
Okay, yes.
He's very clearly eating her out. The question is, where?
So, okay, so in our debate yesterday, we were just kind of trying to figure it out because it is not very clear. Her nails raked against the bars on the floor as I lifted her hips to kiss her. So, he's kissing something in the area, right? And then it's just the next sentence. It's a sentence. As I stroked her there instead.
So that's the thing is, what is there referring to? And is the instead, so is it that I stroked her there instead or that I stroked her there instead?
Thank you. This is the problem, Shelby.
Yes.
Shelby.
She knows what she knows. Did. I would argue. Well, actually, we know my argument. Okay.
When we go on, her trembling built and built until at last she fractured. So it's essentially referring to, like, orgasm.
We know that he is giving her what she wants. She fractures.
I need to put it down.
Yeah, no, I have to stop looking at it. I'm losing my train of thought. This is so much more than anything that they've done, at least like that we've seen them do in the book before. And I think it really speaks to how dire the situation has gotten. Like, she's crying, not during the sex scene, but during the scene generally, as they're recounting or as she's trying to jog his memory. And then afterwards, when the Chaucers show up, she's like tearing up because she thinks this is the end. They're going to die and he's not going to know who she is. And that's scary. It's funny because Bo was the one who said at the beginning, please just tell me that none of you are going to forget me.
Yeah.
And that's it's funny coming from Bo because he's vain. But it's a real fear for everybody. Like, she's not just scared because they're going to die. She's scared because they're going to die and Reid doesn't know why he loves her.
Yeah. Oh, that just made my heart hurt.
I'm sorry. I think at this point we can kind of move into the falling action of the book. Because it all starts when they get on that stake, on that pyre.
That's coated. They coated the ropes.
Again.
Remember, berries?
just to make sure that we can really feel that fear. We know how helpless they are. Before we really get into all of this, because this is a very, I guess the rest of the book too, but so much happens in this falling action. It's all driven by August, who is terrible, but his plan to burn them is to use the fire that Coco had. They haven't yet figured out a way to put it out, though. We know because Coco knows that the only way to put it out is with magic stuff. And so they're trying all of these, like, mundane ways to do it. But somehow he thinks, let me just burn Lou and Reid with this, my own son, first of all. And then the magical fire will just go away and not burn my city down.
Yeah.
Like, what did he think was going to happen?
Yeah.
How did he think that was going to play out? So you can tell that by this point, he's definitely off his rocker. And they've also kind of got, like I think you had mentioned this yesterday, where he's in his, like, lion cloak, and it looks like the lion's head is eating him. And I liked that was kind of... It reminded me of Louis XIV, because Louis XIV was, like, all about the show. And it's not unheard of for leaders to use, like, the lion imagery.
Or the sun.
And so you can kind of tell that he's definitely not all there.
Well, and he wasn't all there when... in the last book. Like, he's stupid. Like, he's not a smart man.
It's definitely like a before and after with Blood and Honey in this one, though. Because in the last one, you're like, if somebody tells him no, or somebody explains, like, reality to him, he could be fine. But this one, you can tell that people have just been feeding his ego through this entire crisis. And that's the worst time to do it, because then people just get so lost to reality. So clearly August is off his rocker. He does not know, like he's not thinking about the consequences of his actions. But what we come to find out is that they aren't a totally lost cause. It's just that the group couldn't get into the Chaucer's tower to free them. They're like, who'd have thought that that was a very hard to breach prison? Yeah. And so this is where shit hits the fan. In the matter of just a few minutes, Reid gets his memories back. We find out that they've got supporters in the crowd. August is flaunting his new shit. Achille is trying to talk him down still. And Reid is really desperate to find those memories. He's starting to kind of see the threads. Well, he'd started to see the threads when they were having sex. And so she is the answer. Yeah. Their love is the answer to all of their problems, pretty much, which is disgustingly cute. I love it. It turns out Beau has disguised himself, or has been disguised with magic, as Achille. And so he has this like way kick-ass reveal where the disguise falls and his dad is like, but then Beau and him start to fight. Beau grabs the torch that has this eternal fire on it and swings it around, because at this point the pyre hadn't been lit yet, and so it's a spark falls off when Beau swings it and catches their stake on fire.
Okay, so this is what is my thinking. God, how stupid of the king. God, how stupid of Beau. Like, why is he... Yeah. Because he knows what kind of fire it is. Like... Yeah. Here we are talking about, like, Coco's, you know, lover. He knows this is Coco's fire. He knows what it can do. And then he's just, like, swinging it around. But it's also Beau, you know? It's like... Yeah. So it's like, you can forgive him for that. But also, like, it was, like, such a mirror of, like, here's August being stupid. And here's Beau, like...
His son also being stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think it was definitely... Because... The assumption kind of comes that they're going to have to carry Saley around. But she holds her own against their adversaries better than Beau does.
Right.
So the stake lights on fire, and it immediately goes up in flames. It does not take long.
No, yeah, it's pretty roaring.
Yeah, and so Reid had made this side comment previously when they got strapped up there where he's like, where are my shoes? Oh yeah, leather doesn't burn, so they had to take it off. But in the process of like throwing the flyer and everything, Beau had also caught his dad on fire, and Auguste was wearing leather, and so was Beau, and it burns straight through those leather pieces of clothing. And immediately Reid manages to undo at least his hand restraints. Lou kicks him off their platform. Coco at this point is already holding Beau, and she's starting to sob because, jumping back in time for a moment, when her and Lou had that conversation on the boat about being vulnerable and what it means to be honest and truthful. And so I think she's having that realization where she didn't do that with Beau when she had the chance, and she's regretting it. And so she's crying over Beau, regretting the fact that she gave up that time together. And suddenly it stops hurting, and Reid realizes that Lou is taking the pain. And that's when he remembers. So he knows that it happened because she had talked about it when they were going over their history together in the cell.
Because she was just like, let's think about the first time we met. And like, she was like going over like being in like the patisserie and stuff. And then she was like, okay, well, that's not it. And it's when he started falling in love with her. It was the key to like his memories. And that's what triggered this.
But he had to feel it. He didn't just need to hear it. He needed to feel it, which was in this case, unfortunately, her literally taking that pain from him, and he realizes what she's doing. But then as he's realizing that, a storm is brewing. A literal storm is brewing. And this is from Coco. Quick tangent about Coco. So like we said, a lot of this is character driven. Coco has undergone a huge transformation. One thing that we brought up a few times is the fact that Coco and Lou are kind of parallels for the different covens. They both hold significant value for them. They both were raised with this expectation of purpose that neither of them is ready to fulfill. They both feel abandoned by their mothers and their mother figures.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the previous books, we've seen Lou dealing with that. But in this one, we meet Coco's mother. We see her actually dealing with the pain of what she perceives as her mother's abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, it is not in the same way that it was for Lou, though.
Right.
And so Coco has had to really confront head on a lot of the bullshit that she's dealt with in her life,
Mm-hmm.
all while also dealing with Ansel's death and her own guilt around that, because shortly before then she had tried kissing him and then rejected him, and so she feels doubly bad about that. And I think, I don't remember specifically if she says it, but it's like she feels if she says yes to Bo, she's dishonoring Ansel somehow.
Right.
And I would go ahead.
I was also going to say that she's also watching Lou go through this. So it's like Coco seems to be this kind of always present presence. She's kind of the silent backbone of the group, I think is kind of how I described it last night. You know, we all know who Bo is in the group. We all know who Ansel is in the group. We all know who Reid is in the group. We all know who Lou is in the group. And so Coco is just kind of like this very like quiet one that's honestly keeping everyone together without them realizing it. And she has a lot of feelings that don't get outwardly expressed like everyone else. You know, Bo says, I just want to be remembered, you know, all of this. And so it's like, but what does Coco want? And like, we never really hear that. And so like, we want to know what she saw in Low Melancholique, like, but we don't. And so, but she's the one that fucking saves everyone. She, all the time. She heals them. She's getting people out of the fucking pit all the time.
No, exactly. And so this was a good opportunity for her to be soft and for her to be okay with that kind of vulnerability, because we do find out that Ansel also visited her at Low Melancholique.
Right.
When, like, after he talked to Lou. And knowing how the conversation went with Lou, there's no doubt in my mind that he told Coco to stop not letting herself be happy, to just go to Bo. He could see how much she loved him. Like, there was no sense in her denying herself that pleasure anymore just because she missed Ansel. She could do both at the same time. She could miss Ansel and show Bo how much she loved him at the same time. So that happened the first time they drink the waters, which means they've gone to Angelica and Isla's castle, and then they've also gone to the chateau and the inn, and then had the conversation about vulnerability. So, I mean, days have passed with her processing this, but it's not until, like, the symbolism of this is beautifully tragic. Bo is dying right now because of her grief.
Yeah. Yes.
The fire is
yeah.
So the source of the fire is her grief. And so they kind of say, like,
while he's saving Reid and Lou.
Yep. She has to get over her grief for the fire to go away. There's not any kind of man-made solution to it. And so the fact that she can't get over her grief is killing Bo.
Man.
And so the storm that's rolling in is the storm of her own emotion moving past that grief. Her ability to move from grief into hope about their future is what saves them. And it doesn't just stop the fire, it also heals all of them. So you think that they're gonna, like, go away from this with, like, gnarly burns or something, but no, it also heals all of the burns that are happening.
Yeah, which allows Reid to come to the realization of, like, who Lou is. Because, like,
he breaks the spell.
because there's, like, this very complicated transactions going on with, like, pain and memory and storms and fire. So there's like a lot going on. So it's like, what is everyone feeling right now? Like, it's just happened so fast because, like,
Yeah.
obviously they're in excruciating pain because they're on fire. And then that goes away because of Lou. But then there's a new pain, right? Because there's this new emotional pain of like, no, Lou, like, oh my God. And then Coco starts grieving about that. And then the rain falls and everything, all peace descends. Ansel descends on everyone and heals everyone. And it's like this tears heal.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the very end of book 2, her tears create the fire underneath because those tears came from a very dark place. Beginning of this book, her tears don't necessarily disappear the scar, but they change the scar from something ugly, this like symbol of the conflict between her and her mother, into this beautiful a tattoo of roses and thorns and a beautiful vine along her neck. And now they've completely healed the wounds caused by her own grief.
Yes.
Very, very powerful scene.
Yes. I agree. There was a lot going on in there.
Yeah.
And then it turns into this really crazy battle that I was kind of like trying to read through, I think.
A lot happens. It gets very scattered.
Yeah, it was very scattered, which is how battles are. So whatever, it's realistic.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a planned thing. There was no like standoff. There was no smackdown in this book.
Yeah. But now that Reid has his memory back, so does Morgaine.
Right.
Which means we're back at square 10-ish.
Yeah.
Which is we have to defeat Morgaine. So when I say scattered, I do mean like it's like a battle. Like it's happening all over the city and they're running around and then they see so many different things happen. It's just like a lot happening at once. But yeah, we've got like the group from book 2, as well as all of the witches from both covens who are now working basically together under Morgaine. And the Melusines show up at one point. And the innocent bystanders and the chasseurs.
Right.
So everyone's fighting everybody. Like it's chaos because nobody knows what's going on. But immediately before Lou and Reid even decide to fight the fight that they've been trying to fight, their number one priority is getting all of the innocents inside and magically locking the doors. So that way the witches can't target them. And so even though we're kind of back to the beginning, their focus has changed. So in book 2, when she's down in the tunnels, she's passing all of them. She's not focused. She's like, oh, I hope these innocent people don't get tied up in Morgaine's games. But they know what Morgaine does now. And so instead of trying to immediately stoke the beast, they just start saving people. They're like, we need to save as many people as we can. They tell the chasseurs, here's who you need to go after. This is what's actually happening. They make sure Philippe gets captured. So that Jean-Luc is back in charge. I think there was also chasseurs who just told Philippe kind of to fuck off. They were like, we don't want to
Well, he was doing stupid shit. He was just like killing everyone.
Yeah.
And they were like, because it was just a clash of like, these are people who are looking at what people are, not who people are. It's not the occult, it's evil. And so a lot of the followers were also of that mind, of just being like, no, these are the people that are bad, like not.
Yeah, and you can see like the classic, the guy who like joins the police force because he wants to feel power, as opposed to like protecting communities. Kind of situation.
Here's like a comment on
modern policing. So they just ignore Philippe, and Jean-Luc starts instructing them. And then the chasseurs are working with the witches and Reid, who are locking the doors.
Yeah.
So they're working side by side with magic. But the big part of this whole situation is when the Melusines show up.
Yeah.
Because Coco and Lou go down this alleyway and they get caught by Boisson and Nicolina. So much happened that the action isn't quite clear in my head, but
well, what happened was Nicolina was something happened with Nicolina. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Like, so Boisson kind of captures Lou for a second.
Yes, and then Nicolina like actually like lets Lou go.
Yeah, so in this whole scene, Nicolina is the reason that they escape.
Yes. Also, she doesn't in the chateau she sees Lou and doesn't say anything. Yep. There was a little seed that Lou left in Nicolina that just said
she doesn't actually care about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is true. Because then when she comes back and when they're finally separate at Le Melancholique, Nicolina's body isn't there. So Boisson and Morgaine show up. They think they've won again. But Nicolina is like floating around and she's like, she left my body somewhere. I guess I'll go find it. And it's just like on the floor in one of the rooms.
Yeah, it's like that was kind of a point where I was like, I think Nicolina's gonna not be totally evil now. Or not. You know, she's going to redeem herself a little bit. I didn't feel like she was fully turned, like she was gonna like work for Lou or anything. But I definitely felt she was feeling sympathetic more now to the other side.
Yeah, she was realizing that like Boisson wasn't hot shit.
But there's a moment when Nicolina like literally could have just like killed Lou and she like didn't.
Yeah. She let them go.
And
which shows that even at that point, so it's not just because she thinks she's about to die in the end of the book, but even at that point she lets Lou go. So Boisson thinks that she's won. And then the Melusines show up. And who's with them but her sister, Angelica. And this is something we kind of hadn't mentioned, but Angelica and Boisson are, like, blood bonded. And so any kind of injury that Boisson has, Angelica will have and vice versa. So you can't kill one without killing the other. And so Coco is there. I think Coco had kind of almost saved Lou.
She tried, yeah.
Yeah, she tried. But Angelica kind of just says goodbye to Coco. And then they start hacking at each other. Nicolina is dying by Boisson's hand, actually.
She bites her throat. Her vocal cords out. Gurgling.
And so she's just bleeding out of her neck, crawling to Angelica and Boisson, who are like trying to get a killing blow at each other. Nicolina grabs Boisson's feet and all three of them go tumbling down.
Yeah.
And so it's because Nicolina just like hung on there for a few more minutes and decided to
be like, fuck you, Boisson.
Yeah. It was underwhelming in a good way.
Yes. Because they didn't deserve like a triumphant death. But they needed to kill each other.
It was time for their end.
They needed to go down ugly together.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And so that was a hard scene for Coco too, to have finally accepted what her life is and like the relationship with her mother, just to know that it's got to come to an end.
But then it moves because there's a few moments when like Lou like is calling Claude because like Claude's in his like tree form or something, and he intervenes.
The battle comes to them and she's about to get hit with something and he jumps in the way.
Yeah. And then he intervened and creates this massive crack in the middle of the earth. And then it's like Land Before Time when you have to like make sure you're on the right side.
Yeah.
Or you have to climb all the way down and see Sharptooth. And conveniently, the rest of the gang kind of runs up, right? Like Reid and Beau, I think, are together and meets them. And they realize Morgaine's like, they're like Samara from The Ring, just like ready to like get Lou on the other side. So Lou, and I knew it with all of my fucking heart the minute we found that syringe in Celie's bag. I was like, she's gonna be the one. she's going to hold Morgaine down while Lou does the killing blow. And I was right. That syringe makes it. And so on one side of the crack is Morgaine, Lou, and Saley.
Yeah.
And the rest of the gang they can't do anything. And like, oh my God, you can just see like Reid like pacing back and forth trying to figure out how to get over and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And of course Morgaine's wearing like the lion skin, of course.
Yeah.
And, you know, they do some magic battling and stuff, but it's not very climactic.
Yeah.
Because you're just so ready to be done with her.
And kind of like I had said before with the argument over, is the magic the reason Morgaine is the way she is, or is it just Morgaine?
Yeah.
And so at this point she doesn't have the magic, and she's still just the worst. Yeah. We know that Lou is more powerful. We know that Morgaine doesn't have the same amount of magic, the same power of magic that she had before. And so her talking all big during this scene is really just, it's sad almost to watch her. Like, she's so washed up by this point.
So I'm excited that they finally put this mother-daughter situation to bed, it was huge. Morgaine says, "You were never my daughter." Lou says, "You gave me life." And she says, "I gave you purpose. What should I have done, darling? Cradled you in my arms while others' daughters perished? While they burned? Should I have valued your life more than theirs?" And she goes, "Yes." And I was like, yeah. Like, that's what you're supposed to do, Mom. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I was just like,
Exactly.
She didn't even have a beat to think about it. She was just like, yes. Yep. And that's when it just, like, hits home that it's like, everything leading up was for this moment.
Mm-hmm.
You should have valued me. You should have protected me, because I am the only person in the world who still loves you. And Morgaine died.
Yeah. I love that the way that they do it is Saley and Lou together.
Yeah.
Because Lou would not have emotionally been able to do it on her own. But Saley going over there and helping her.
No, yeah, absolutely. Lou always needed to kill Morgaine. Like, I don't think Saley was ever going to kill her, but she definitely had a reason to be there. And
exactly, she had just as much skin in the game as Lou needed that push, that like reminder almost of like, you're not just here to argue with your mom about your self-worth. You're here to put down a tyrant. But
also, like, you have help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't have to do it alone. And that is the lesson for Lou, this whole thing. Because Morgaine thought that she had to be the most powerful and rule through fear. Lou sees that she can do it. She earned the Madame Sorcier's power by having a community helping her.
Yes. And then they have a jolly time at the patisserie.
Yes. It felt like the like, what is it, the after credit scene of Avengers when they're all getting shawarma after.
Yeah. And they all make the guy make sticky buns.
He would have done it anyway for Lou.
Totally would.
Okay, so now for the epilogue, which beautiful scene. Mm-hmm. All told from Ansel's point of view.
Yes.
Because I wasn't allowed to have any tears left in my body, I don't think.
Oh, I cried so hard.
Yeah. They were good tears. It was like the kind of tears that stop eternal fire.
Yes. They heal.
Yes, healing tears. So we find them back at the chateau with Lou getting ready for their wedding.
Mm-hmm. And Ansel is sitting on the bed next to Madame Labelle. And Celie and Coco are, like, fussing around, like, Lou and, like, doing her hair and stuff. And it's just so sweet to finally also have Madame Labelle there, because she's, like, really pretty much absent during this book. But she's also Reid's mom. And also kind of mom to, like, the group. Yeah. She was, like, there at the beginning of all of the fellowship, you know?
Yes.
she's the Gandalf. So she's there, and Ansel, and that's another thing, is Madame Labelle kind of knows he's there.
Yeah.
Just like in that other vision not vision, but like they like kind of sat in at the hearing and like she knew that they were there. That was really sweet.
Well, in the corner is actually Manon.
Yes. And she feels a bit uncomfortable, but
yeah,
I'm glad that she's there.
Yeah, because that was another like really heartbreaking part of book 2, which is that, and book 1, is that even her friends are so willing to just betray her for her mother, right?
And then there's that scene in Morgana's chambers when they're up there escaping out of the window.
What we have is like real proof that what she's doing is ruling them through fear.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it was just like the sheer amount of times that Manon had to like decide to betray her friend that is starting to break her, and the reason she doesn't tell Morgane or Voisin that it was Lou and their group that broke in. She just says there was an intruder. She doesn't say who it was. But if she'd have said something to Voisin, even, it would have been like, it would have sent.
But there was that, right, there was like that moment when she was like trying to convince Mana that we're all outlaws. There's a lot.
Yeah.
We all have people who want to kill us. Like, but we can do the right thing and we can do it together. And like giving her a chance. While that was like such an important scene for her and Manon, like that was also through Reid's point of view, and Reid got to see Lou forgive essentially someone who's literally tried to murder her and like hunt her. So I was happy to see Manon there. Yeah.
It's funny because going back again to Isla's accusations of Lou being just ordinary, she has this way of picking up like weird allies. Like they tried to make the people allies in book 2, and they tried to get the Melusines, but even along the way, like Achille, the father Achille, he helps them anyway.
Yeah,
he helps them just because he sees that they're good people.
Yeah,
the way that they win over the werewolves isn't through just asking, it's because there's a life debt at this point, and then afterwards they help them out because Morgane's batshit crazy, and they're ready to be rid of her. They know that Lou can take that helm.
Yeah.
And so having like jumping back then I guess to the epilogue, having Manon in that room with them shows that she was honest.
Yeah.
She wasn't just trying to win their way out of the tower. She wasn't just trying to see if her friends still cared about her. She genuinely wanted Manon by her side.
Yeah. And then they walk out, and it was like, so, they're under this pear tree, which is the only tree that like survived Morgane's magical wrath. Yeah. And it's Coco and Bo walk her down the aisle, right?
It's Bo and a picture of Ansel.
Oh, really? I don't remember that.
Yeah, so Ansel in spirit and in picture walks her down the aisle. My favorite part of this, though, is that he talks about the fact that Madame LaBelle keeps giving Father Achille like doomy eyes.
Yeah.
She did it after the battle, too, which tells me that if she's doing it at the wedding, then he's already doing it.
Yeah.
He's doing her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's going on.
Oh, yeah.
So Madame LaBelle and Achille are banging.
Hell yeah. Emphasis on hell.
Yeah. Emphasis on bang.
Hell yeah. The wedding is a really sweet scene. Ansel's talking about how happy everyone is together. Coco's insulting Bo, and he's still in love with her, and she's doing it out of love because they're finally together. It does kind of make me think that Lou's paradise that she had imagined could be possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a real future for them, which I love.
Yeah.
And then they had the weird exchange with Madame Sauvage.
Yes.
So she's like the Curiel lady that we've met a couple of times.
She's Claude.
You right?
Yeah, I was so happy about that. And I was like, of course it is. Of course it's Claude. He just shows up when he's needed. And and she's...
Especially because it was the trees.
Yeah.
The pear trees.
Yeah.
She's like... Claude, is like, did you ever plant those? Well, funny enough, I have the seeds right here. Take them and plant them right now.
Yeah. And then this orchard just comes up.
So they had spent all day trying to like cover up how ugly it looks because all of the trees were gone. And then drunkenly get to reset it to its original glory. And then the very, very last thing that happens is that Ansel's parents show up. So he finally knows who his parents are. He talks about how he has these traits of his dad's and he has these traits of his mom. And it's like comforting for him to have found those roots because he was so desperate for them before.
Yeah.
And they say that Etienne is waiting for him, which means all of the souls that were inside of Nicolina, all of her mice, were freed when she died.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tear up just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because it means that Lou did save Etienne.
Yeah.
She didn't just help him remember who he was. She helped free those lost souls.
Yes. Lou.
Beautiful ending.
Yes.
Beautiful ending.
Oh, I cried so hard.
It was also because it ends on Ansel going back into whatever comes after. So whatever afterlife.
Right.
It was a goodbye for him. And because it was like the end of the trilogy too.
Yeah.
It was a goodbye
to everyone. And we got to see everyone so happy.
Yeah.
You know, like Madame LaBelle and Achille, they both got themselves. You have like Reid and Lou, of course, and then you have like Bo and Coco.
Yep.
Who have like finally found peace with each other. And then you like know like the state of everything is good because Celie and I think it's Victoire, one of them dies. We can never remember which one, Victoire or Violet, but they and Jean-Luc start a new Chaucer. And obviously Bo and Coco are going to rule. Yeah. And Lou and Reid are going to rule. Yeah. And it's going to be like such an amazing world.
It's the start of a new age for them. And you can feel like how young and fresh and innocent that new age is in this scene.
Yeah.
It's a heavy ending, but in a good way.
It feels very like sweet after so much bitter.
Yes.
You said she's writing a different series now?
Yeah, she started a new book.
Is it in the same world, do you think?
I don't think so. There's very little detail on it because I had first started following her before Gods and Monsters came out. So she was still doing all the promo for that. And she kept saying, I can't really talk about the new book because we still have to market this one. Yeah. And even since then, all she really does is talk about kind of writing slumps and normal writer woes and stuff like that. And so nothing really book specific, just writer general stuff.
In terms of closing thoughts, I feel like we covered just about every inch of that book. Yeah. I think we really felt like this book delivered so much. Yeah. And we didn't want to leave anything out. So I definitely felt like there was just so much to unpack and like everything that you really wanted from the last book, even some of the first book, was just really released. Like unleashed. I feel like it was just like she just like started real quick on like putting everything back together into this like new perfect world.
Jumping back to one of the opening thoughts that I had said about this being a character driven book, it becomes an arc of each of them individually coming to terms with their own pasts and what that has brought to now. So not focusing on the past, but recognizing it and acknowledging who they are now. There was a line that we had brought up in the last episode that Devereaux has when he's talking to Reid. And I won't read the whole passage, but the part that I want to focus on is when he says you can't know another person until you truly know yourself. And more than just Reid and Lou's relationship, that proves to be so abundantly true because Coco has to come to terms with her own grief and her own love, like her own hope for a future before she can let herself love Bo. Celie and Jean-Luc have to shuck their prejudices and really confront their moral compass in order to help this group.
Yeah.
And they do it. They do it without question. Because they care more about Lou and Reid and Coco and Bo than they do about the fact that they're witches.
Yeah.
And so I love that that kind of offhand comment between Devereaux and Reid becomes
like kind of the crux.
The saving grace for this group. Yeah.
Well, Melissa, do you think we could say anything else about this book? Is there anything else?
The only thing is just how oddly hopeful it made me feel after the last book. I'm like, maybe it's not all bad.
Yeah. Maybe there is hope. It was a very great end to a beautiful world, beautiful characters, and just everything that we're sad to see it go, but it will live in our hearts forever.
And if she ever decides to like have a one-off single book, I will buy 7 of them.
But that ends our Serpent and Dove series with Shelby Mahurin. Next week we're going to be kicking it off with some V.E. Schwab, which has some of the best looking books I've ever seen in my life.
Gorgeous.
And I really can't wait. I mean, I have already started it, so I just hope that the story is as beautiful as the cover.
I can't wait to talk with you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you already read it?
No, but I can't wait to talk about it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Maybe I just like our conversations, Bethany.
No, yeah. It sounded like you were like, I'm waiting for you to finish it. And I'm like...
No. Well, I am waiting for you to finish it, but I'm also waiting for me to finish it.
So we'll be starting that next week. You can find us on Instagram at inbedwithbooks_. Chat with us on there. Tell us what you thought about Gods and Monsters. And
cry with
us, laugh with us, sing with us. And we will see you guys next week. Happy reading.
Happy reading.
Bye.
Bye.
And the cell is made, out of the wood from Reid's ball sack. No. From Reid's Balisarde, that tree that ate his Balisarde, his ball sack.
Do you want to try that whole thing again?
What do you mean it's perfect?
I can hear you trying not to say ball sack.
Okay.